Hi, I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. An absolute pleasure to be able to speak to you about this really, um, you know, plot twisting and genre defying film, South of Heaven. Um, so what was it about Aaron's script that appealed to you? Because when we first meet Annie and Jimmy Ray, we kind of think maybe this is going to be kind of like, a couple reuniting, something of a love story, but it quickly
Yeah.
takes a much darker turn. So when you first read the script, what was the appeal for you?
For me, when I first read the script, the appeal was Annie. I fell in love with Annie. I wanted to play Annie. I related so much to Annie. And I just had this vision of her that was so clear. And I really deeply wanted to play her. But before I even read the script, was it before or after? I'm not sure, but sometimes synonymous with reading the script. I watched Big Bad Wolves, which was Aaron Kasheli's great big hit out of Israel. Um, and that film was so up my alley. It's also quite genre defying. And I love films like that. I'm a big fan of Roy Anderson, and I'm a big fan of Wes Anderson, and I'm a big fan of, the Rousseau brothers, and like anybody with a slightly twisted sense of humor and like a darkness to the film when it's visually so beautiful and perfect. There's something about that kind of collision of visual perfection with the darker shadow side of life that appeals to me. Um, and so I was a big fan of him, and I wanted to work with Aaron as well.
Mm. And how did you see your character of Annie? Because yeah, at the beginning, obviously, very quickly we learn that she's got a year to live. She has cancer, but as the film progresses, we kind of there's quite a steeliness to her, and we perhaps get glimpses that there's more to this character that we don't actually hear that much about. We don't know about the period where her partner was in jail. Her father's kind of got a shadowy past. So how did you see Annie, and how did you prepare to play her?
Um, yeah, it's so interesting because I still had questions when we started shooting about her past. And there were moments where there's this amazing scene with Michael Coulter where Annie tells stories of her past. And it's the first time that you realize that, oh, there's more to this woman than meets the eye. While filming that scene, I was still sussing out with Aaron, like, okay, but when did this happen, and who did this, and what, and where, and trying to kind of parse it together in my mind. But there was something so timeless about this film that felt like it was removed from reality in some way. Like you could have just taken that film and plopped it in so many different places and times. Um, and so I wanted to hold that kind of timeless quality through my portrayal of Annie. I didn't want to give her, for example, like a super regional accent and like plant her right in that place, or to give her a very like clear definition of her age or her like social status. So there was funny things like her costumes were very retro, and you couldn't really figure out, like it wouldn't give you an indication of like, oh, she was the cool girl in high school, or like, oh, she's the stay-at-home mom who doesn't get out of her tights every day. Like there was nothing you could define about her through her clothes other than her just sort of having her own sense of style. And so there's a lot of choices that were made like that, and one of those choices was not to lean into the past of her family, which is quite hard and dark and would make her a sort of criminally capable potentially, but instead to lean into just the essence of who she was. And Aaron and I kept describing her as she should be the life, the light, and the sunlight in this film.
And what about working with Jason? I mean, he's one of these actors who's kind of made that transition to kind of out and out comedy, more into drama. And of course, with like the much loved and critically acclaimed Ted Lasso. And here he gives a really interesting performance again, because you sort of keep thinking, who the character is, but then he kind of keeps surprising you. And it kind
Mm.
towards the end kind of get more of a John Wick-esque character coming through. So how did you see Jimmy Ray, and what was it like working alongside Jason?
Well, I was as surprised as anybody by his performance, because if you read the words on the page and you imagine Jason Sudeikis playing that role, it's a completely different role. I thought I thought we were going to do a film where he was really funny and charming and like light and goofy. And then I showed up and this other Jason turned up on camera when they would call action. And I was like, whoa, hang on a minute. What are we doing here? I had to really like figure out, do I need to adjust my performance accordingly? And I did a little bit. I did have to sort of adjust. I couldn't play at opposite what I had imagined he would perform, like what he would do. I had to play opposite what he really was doing. And so that actually gave the film more gravitas, more weight. There were scenes that I sort of had pictured being light and playful that turned out to be, there was a real undertone of heaviness and emotion. And so, yeah, it was a surprise for me too. I was completely surprised. Jason and I had hung out before we decided to do the film together because we wanted to see, like, if we dug each other, if we had chemistry, like, could this work? Would we enjoy this together? And he was just a blast. And he was the Jason you imagine. You know, he was always goofing around with me, and we just had a great time. And so I was really happy, and I felt very lucky to be working with him because as a person, he is generous and he is kind and he is respectful and he's incredibly lovely. And then, yeah, and then as a performer, he came out with this totally different thing.
Mm. And that kind of second guessing and the kind of role reversal also extends to kind of the supporting characters as well, in the sense of, you know, Parole Officer Schmidt, played amazingly by Shea Wiggum, who almost comes off a much more threatening presence than, you know, the sort of ostensible, you know, crime gangster of Whit Price, played by Mike. So, you know, what was it like working with those two as well? And you have some incredible scenes, one you mentioned earlier, you know, where these conversations, there's so much tension and they kind of end up being almost like jewels between the characters. So what was it like working with them and filming in particular the scenes that you have with them?
Well, I have to say that scene with Mike Coulter where I am ostensibly hanging out and getting high with my kidnapper. That scene also was another reason why I fell in love with the script. When I read that scene, and then I read the corresponding scenes with Jimmy Ray and his son and the actor Thaddeus and Jason, you know, they were having a sort of parallel flipped experience where you go from kidnapper to like empathizing with this child and trying to, you know, make friends with him almost. Those scenes really sold me on the movie, and they're the very scenes that made me fall in love with Aaron Cashel is the director, because he has an ability to take extremely violent, gory subject matter and visuals and pair them with so much tenderness and heart and humanity that you don't come away feeling dirty. Whereas when I watch gore, I come away feeling dirty. I don't like it. But there's such redemption in his films. It's because of his nature. He's got such a tender heart and he's such a gentle man. And so I love those scenes, and I love doing those scenes with Mike Coulter. We just, I feel like that was one of those days at work where there was no work required. Like we just sat back, we shared a joint, we had some talks. It was really, really nice. And working with Shea, all the men in this film worked so differently. I mean, Mike Coulter is an extremely straightforward actor. He comes in prepared, he knows what he's going to do, he knows what's happening, and he just lays it all out there. And so you see immediately, like, okay, this is what I'm playing opposite, and I sort of know where we're going together. Shea, on the other hand, is so from the hip. And like, he's the kind of guy who wants to move and dance and play and feel it out. And every scene's going to be an experiment. And every scene we're going to take risks and chances and try new things. And so that was like, you know, it went from like salsaing with Mike, where there's like steps and this is where we go and this is how we do it, and it's a matter of perfecting it, to just like freestyling with Shea. And I felt really honored and grateful and blessed to work with Shea, because I think anyone who acts that way stretches their co-star, you know. And so I felt like, okay, I need I need to be able to be on my toes and constantly keep up with whatever he's bringing, which keeps the scene really alive. And it really challenged my acting abilities, and I loved it. I loved every second of it.
And there are a lot of different kind of tonal shifts throughout the film. And, there's moments where there is violence, there is gore. And then you also, you're in Texas, Mexico. So what were some of the highlights and challenges of actually shooting the film and being in these locations?
Well, I would say the biggest challenge was that we were supposed to be filming the movie in the summer in California. And it was supposed to be this like hot sort of Texas, like westerny feeling, muggy, and that was sort of the vibe of it. But because of money and scheduling and all the business of our job, we ended up filming it in Dallas in the middle of winter. So it was freezing cold. It was totally overcast and gray. There was no sunshine. There were no leaves. There was nothing about it that resembled the movie that we had originally planned to make. And so we're constantly tonally adjusting scenes to fit the environment, because Aaron, like I described, he's sort of in that Roy Anderson, he likes to paint tableaus, and the performers have to be a part of their environment. They can't be separate from it. And so even the performances had to change according to the environment that we suddenly found ourselves in.
And the effect of kind of having all these twists and turns in the story is that I feel like, you're never sure who you're supposed to fully empathize with, and who's the good guy and who's the villain. So what do you think that people will take away from watching it? And I think there's some other themes that come up, aren't there? The fact, Annie's character, how do you feel when you're reaching the end of your life, when you've got nothing to lose? And then also for people coming out of prison, can you ever escape your criminal history? Does it always sort of catch up with you, whatever you try and do? So, what do you think some of the themes are and people take away from watching it?
Gosh, I think hopefully what will happen is, in a perfect world, is that instead of coming away from the film going, what the fuck just happened? and it ending right there, that people will come away from the film and hopefully have watched it with somebody else, at least one other person, so that they can sit down and really dissect it and ask each other, like, what happened at the end? How did you see that? What did you think about this plot twist? Why did that happen? Why didn't they go there and do this? Because there's nothing about the film that you can anticipate or expect. It's all such a surprise. And it doesn't sort of button everything up perfectly, which are my favorite films, because I love the idea of people then going away and having the chance to find their own conclusions and sort of interpret it in their own ways, and reflect on how it made them feel, or reflect on what it made them think about in their own lives. And then they're going to reflect that back onto the film, and they're sort of going to come to their own conclusions about the story we were telling, and where the characters ended up, and who's doing what, and how that made them feel. And I think especially right now, in our third year dealing with a pandemic and its measures, and having so much of our life and our freedom taken away, that I think people hopefully will come away having learned a little bit from Annie about how to carpe diem, about how to not give away your freedoms until they're gone, not live like you're dead before you're actually dead, to live fully and in our freedoms, to not take them for granted, to embrace them, to dance, to play, to sing, to love, to embrace, to celebrate, at every chance we get, because they aren't a guarantee, and they can just go away tomorrow. And I think Annie can be a shining light to all of us, to remind us that, we got to keep smiling and we got to keep living.
Definitely. And can you tell us if you've got any other roles lined up? What you're going to be working on next?
Well, I just finished doing Quantumania in England. So I was out in the UK filming the next Ant-Man and the Wasp installment. And that finished, let's see, at the end of November. And now I'm rolling out a podcast series that I'm doing on my Instagram page Evangeline Lilly. I think it's official. Yeah, Evangeline Lilly official. Um, and I've got a few things in the cooker after that, but because they're still cooking, I won't bother.
All right. Well, it's been absolutely amazing to speak to you. Thank you so much for sharing all that with us. And I hope people can get out and see this incredible film. And best of luck with your future projects as well.
It's such a pleasure. Thank you for the great questions, really.
Thanks. Lovely to speak to you. Thanks a lot.
Cheers.
Enjoy your day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.